Pack your bags, Mom. I've sold your lake house. That's how it started. No warning, no explanation, no chance for Claire Montgomery to even breathe before her only son stripped away the one place that still felt like home. She had raised him there. Summers spent on the dock, winters huddled by the old brick fireplace, holidays filled with noise and laughter. And now? Gone. Sold. Without her consent, without even a conversation. The betrayal wasn't whispered. It wasn't softened. It hit her at the breakfast table with a cold cup of coffee between her hands. Ethan, her Ethan, stood tall in the doorway with a look she didn't recognize. Her voice cracked when she asked, "Why would you do this?" He didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. His answer was short, sharp, final. Because you don't need it anymore. Viewers, if you've ever had something ripped from you, something tied to every memory you hold dear, you already know the kind of silence that followed. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't calm. It was the silence of shock. Claire's heart raced, not because of the house itself, but because of the coldness in her son's tone. This wasn't just about property. This was personal, and what he said next, that single sentence, would begin to unravel decades of secrets she never knew existed. But before we get there, take a second. Tell me, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it for you? Drop it in the comments, and if you're new here, subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear every detail because this story is about to test the limits of family loyalty, betrayal, and survival. Now, back to Claire. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. This house wasn't just wood and nails, it was her late husband's legacy. It was the only constant after he passed. Ethan knew that. He knew, and still he said it. Still he sold it. Why? She searched his face for some flicker of warmth, some trace of the boy she raised. But his eyes darted to the clock on the wall, as if even this confrontation was running behind schedule. "We don't have time for this," he muttered. No time? For the truth? For the end of everything she built? Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Claire didn't yet know how much her life was about to change. She didn't yet know what had been hidden inside those walls, or why Ethan's hands trembled when he said the words. All she knew was that the lake house was gone. And with it, the last piece of safety she thought she had. And that's when she realized this wasn't just a sale. It was a warning. The lake house. For Claire Montgomery, it wasn't just a structure. It was memory carved into wood, laughter stitched into walls, loss and love bound together by the water outside its windows. She could still see her late husband, Michael, hammer in hand, building the dock himself the summer Ethan turned 7. Every nail, every plank was done with care. The 4th of July fireworks over Lake George, the smell of barbecue drifting through the air, neighbors gathered around, children running barefoot in the grass. That house wasn't just a building. It was a story. A promise. And now, Ethan had ripped it away. Claire found herself driving there that afternoon, the steering wheel slick under her palms. She had to see it one last time, to convince herself it wasn't really gone. The road twisted through pine trees and quiet cabins. Sunlight filtered down in broken stripes, the kind of light that made everything look softer. But inside, Claire's chest tightened. She couldn't shake the echo of Ethan's words. Because you don't need it anymore. She pulled into the gravel driveway. The house stood as it always had. White siding, blue shutters, the porch swing still creaking in the wind. But for the first time in decades, it felt unfamiliar. Distant, like a friend refusing to meet her gaze. Stepping inside, the air smelled of cedar and faint smoke, the lingering ghosts of winters spent by the fire. Dust had settled on the shelves, but the photographs still stared back at her. Ethan's crooked smile on his 10th birthday, Michael holding him up on his shoulders, her own face caught in the glow of happier years. She reached out, brushing a frame with her fingertips. Her throat burned, and then something caught her eye. A gap, small, barely noticeable. The corner of the attic hatch, slightly ajar. She froze. She had closed it last spring, she was certain. Michael used to say the house kept its secrets in that attic. And suddenly, Claire felt the weight of those words. Her hand shook as she pulled the cord, the ladder unfolding with a groan. Dust rained down. The air above was thick, heavy with neglect. She climbed slowly, each step creaking like it might shatter beneath her weight. At the top, boxes, stacks of them, old furniture, yellowed newspapers. But one box sat apart, smaller, wooden, with initials carved on the lid. M.M. Michael Montgomery, her husband. Her pulse quickened. She hesitated, then slid the box toward her. The wood scraped against the floorboards. She opened it. Inside, letters, brittle with age, photographs she had never seen, and a leather-bound ledger. The first page bore Michael's handwriting, familiar, steady. If you are reading this, it means the truth is finally catching up. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The truth? What truth? Her fingers shook as she turned the page. Names, dates, amounts of money scribbled in neat columns. And then, photographs. People she didn't recognize. Some smiling, some missing from the story. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't just a family treasure chest. This was something else. Something her husband had never told her. Something Ethan might have known all along. Her heart pounded as the thought returned. This wasn't just a sale. It was a warning. And what Claire discovered in that attic was only the beginning. But before we go on, I want to ask you, if you found a box in your family's house with names and photographs you didn't recognize, would you open it or leave it untouched? Comment below. I'll be reading every answer. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, because the next part of this story will change everything. The phone rang just as Claire closed the ledger. The sound was sharp, jarring in the stillness of the attic. She clutched the book to her chest before climbing down, her knees weak. By the time she reached the living room, the ringing had stopped, but the voicemail light blinked. She pressed play. Mom, it's Ethan. Listen. Don't go back to the lake house. I mean it. Don't. There are things you don't understand. I'll explain soon. Just trust me. Trust. The word echoed like an insult. How could she trust the same son who sold her memories without so much as a conversation? That night, the family gathered in Ethan's suburban home just outside Albany. The air was thick with tension. His wife, Danielle, moved with mechanical precision in the kitchen, setting out plates of casserole neither she nor anyone else wanted to eat. Claire sat at the table, her hands folded tightly. Across from her, Ethan avoided her eyes, tapping his fingers against the wood. Danielle shot him nervous glances, as if guarding a secret she couldn't quite keep. Finally, Claire broke the silence. Why did you do it, Ethan? Why did you sell the house? His jaw tightened. Because you don't need it anymore. The same words, the same cold dismissal. But now, Claire noticed the tremor in his voice, the way his eyes flicked, just for a moment, toward Danielle. And then Danielle spoke, softly, but with an edge. It was for the best. You wouldn't have understood. Claire turned to her. Understood what? Danielle's lips parted, but before she could answer, Ethan cut her off. Drop it, Mom. Just let it go. Let it go. 3 words that felt like another knife. Claire pushed back her chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. Her chest was tight, but her voice was steady. I won't let it go. That house wasn't just mine. It was your father's. And there are things in it. Things you clearly don't want me to find. For a moment, silence. Only the ticking of the wall clock. Then Danielle slammed her fork down. You don't know what you're talking about. Her voice cracked. Ethan reached for her hand, but Danielle pulled away. Claire saw it then, the fissure between them. Whatever secret bound them together, it was already tearing them apart. She stood, her gaze fixed on her son. You may have taken the house, Ethan, but you won't take the truth. With that, she left. But as she stepped outside into the cold night air, a thought struck her, sharp and terrifying. If Ethan wanted her away from the lake house so badly, then maybe the house itself wasn't the real secret. Maybe the ledger was only the first piece of something far bigger. And what Claire uncovered next would prove just how dangerous her son's decision truly was. Claire sat at her kitchen table, the wooden ledger spread open under the pale glow of a single lamp. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes every creak feel like a warning. Her fingers traced the ink, faded but deliberate. Michael's handwriting, firm, steady, unmistakable. Page after page filled with columns, names, dates, and amounts of money that didn't make sense. Some entries were just a few $100s, others, tens of thousands. But all of them connected to people she didn't recognize. Until she reached the third page. There it was. Ethan Montgomery. A date, 2 years ago, and a number, $250,000. Her throat tightened. Why would her late husband, Ethan's father, have written his son's name here, connected to a sum like that? Claire flipped further. More names. Janet Ruiz, 1998, $12,000. Franklin H. Tate, 2005, $45,000. The list went on, stretching across decades. She leaned back, the chair groaning under her weight. Her mind raced. Michael had been a banker, a careful, methodical man, but he was also private, secretive at times. And now Claire wondered if she had ever truly known him. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Stop reading. Burn the book. Her hands trembled as the words glowed on the screen. She glanced around her dark kitchen, heart thudding. Was someone watching? No reply came, just silence. But Claire's instincts screamed that the danger wasn't abstract anymore. Whoever had sent that message knew she had the ledger, and they wanted it gone. Claire closed the book, pressing her palms against the cover as though she could shield it. She knew what she had to do. Find out who those names belonged to. The next morning, she drove into town, the ledger tucked into a canvas bag on the passenger seat. She parked outside the Albany Public Library, an old brick building she and Michael had visited often when Ethan was still a boy. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old paper. She carried the ledger to a corner table, far from the main reading room. With shaky hands, she began typing the names into a laptop. One by one, stories emerged. Janet Ruiz died in 1998, ruled a drowning accident at Lake George. Franklin H. Tate, heart attack 2005, alone in a motel just outside Syracuse. Dozens more. Always a sudden death. Always unexplained details that didn't quite fit. Claire's breath quickened. Her late husband's ledger wasn't just financial. It was a record, a pattern. But then came the real blow. One name leapt off the page. Jada Miller. The name was recent, just 3 years ago. Claire's stomach dropped, because she remembered that name. Jada had been Ethan's childhood friend, the girl who lived 2 houses down by the lake. Sweet, kind, always smiling. But Claire remembered the news. Jada's grandmother had passed under mysterious circumstances. Nobody ever questioned it deeply. Until now. Claire's hands shook as she shut the laptop. Her pulse raced. This wasn't just about Ethan selling the lake house. This was about something older. Something her husband had started, and her son might have continued. And Claire realized something terrifying. She wasn't just uncovering her family's past. She was prying open a door others wanted sealed forever. And someone was already watching. The next day, Claire sat at her kitchen counter with the ledger open before her, its pages heavy with secrets. She barely slept. Every creak of the house, every shadow passing outside the curtains, it all made her nerves tighten. She sipped cold coffee when the knock came. 3 sharp raps. Unexpected. Her chest tightened as she opened the door. A woman stood there, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, eyes sharp but tired. Claire recognized her instantly, though it had been years. "Jada," she whispered. Jada Miller, Ethan's childhood friend, the girl who once spent summers catching fireflies by the lake, who used to call Claire Miss Montgomery, with a shy smile. But now her expression carried none of that innocence, only urgency. "We need to talk," Jada said, pushing past the doorway before Claire could respond. Inside, Jada scanned the room quickly, as though making sure no one else was there. Then her eyes landed on the ledger. "You found it," she said quietly. Claire's breath caught. You know about this?" Jada's lips pressed into a thin line. She pulled out a folded photograph from her jacket pocket and slid it across the table. Claire picked it up. Her stomach lurched. It was Jada's grandmother, smiling on her porch swing, the lake glittering behind her. But the photo wasn't the unsettling part. It was the handwriting on the back. Michael Montgomery's handwriting. The same steady script from the ledger. "Your husband kept records," Jada said, "and my grandmother was one of them." Her voice shook, but her eyes stayed locked on Claire's. "Her death wasn't natural. I knew it, but nobody believed me. And now I think Ethan knows more than he's telling." Claire felt her legs weaken, lowering herself into the chair. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why are you here, Jada?" Jada leaned in, her voice low, urgent. "Because you're in danger. Whoever's behind this, they won't let you keep that ledger. My grandmother tried to keep notes too. She didn't last long." The words sank heavy, cold. Claire gripped the ledger, her knuckles white. "Do you think Ethan?" Jada shook her head, hesitating. "I don't know, but I do know this. When your son sold that lake house, it wasn't just a real estate deal. It was to erase something, to bury the last piece of evidence." A silence fell between them. Outside, a car slowed at the curb. Both women stiffened. The engine idled. Then, just as suddenly, it rolled on. Jada exhaled, her jaw tight. "You don't have much time. Whatever you do, don't trust Ethan, and don't stay here tonight. Too many eyes on you." Claire wanted to argue, to say she didn't scare easily, but the weight in Jada's voice, the conviction born of loss, kept her silent. Because deep down, Claire knew the truth. Her husband's past wasn't just history. It was alive, and it was hunting her now. The morning after Jada's warning, Claire forced herself into routine. She told herself it was just fear clouding her judgment, that maybe she was overreacting. Coffee, garden gloves, a walk through the yard, normal things. But nothing about her life felt normal anymore. By afternoon, the unease had settled into her bones. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. Her head felt light, her chest tight. At first, she blamed the stress. But when her vision blurred and her knees buckled, she knew something was wrong. Claire collapsed against the kitchen counter. Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Her breath came shallow, ragged. The last thing she remembered was the sound of the front door opening. Darkness. When she woke, the lights above her were harsh, sterile. The steady beep of a monitor kept time with her racing heart. She was in a hospital bed. Her eyes fluttered open, and the first face she saw was Ethan's. "Mom," he said, his voice lined with concern. He took her hand. "You scared me half to death." But Claire's instinct screamed. The way he gripped her hand, too tightly. The way his eyes darted toward the door, as though checking who might overhear. A nurse entered, adjusting Claire's IV. She smiled politely, but Claire noticed her badge. Allison, CNA. The name scratched at something in her memory, but her foggy mind couldn't place it. "Vitals are stable," Allison said, almost too quickly. She glanced at Ethan. Not at Claire, at Ethan. The look was brief, but Claire caught it. A flicker of something unspoken. Her pulse quickened. "Allison's been wonderful," Ethan said softly, brushing Claire's hair back. "She's been looking out for you." Claire's throat tightened. Every instinct told her that whatever was in that IV wasn't meant to help. But how could she prove it? How could she fight when her body felt like lead, her voice too weak to call for help? The nurse adjusted the drip, her smile tight, rehearsed. "Just rest, Mrs. Montgomery. You're safe here." Safe. The word rang hollow. Through the blur of her vision, Claire saw Jada appear in the doorway, her face pale, eyes wide. Their gazes locked. And in that moment, Claire realized. Jada knew. Something was happening to her, something far worse than stress or age. And the people closest to her might not be here to save her, but to silence her. Claire lay in the hospital bed, the soft hum of machines surrounding her. Every time she drifted toward sleep, she startled awake, her eyes darting to the IV bag, to Allison's shadow in the hall, to Ethan's figure pacing the waiting room beyond the glass. She couldn't rest, not until she knew the truth. That evening, Jada slipped quietly into the room. She carried a folder tucked under her arm, her face tight with determination. "I did some digging," Jada whispered, glancing over her shoulder before pulling a chair close. She opened the folder. Inside were printouts, highlighted notes, and grainy photographs from old newspapers. "Claire, this isn't random. The names in that ledger? They match obituaries, dozens of them. People connected by one thing. Every single one was treated at facilities where Allison once worked as a nursing assistant." Claire's heart thudded. She remembered the nurse's smile, the way her hand had lingered on the IV. Jada continued. "It's a pattern, disguised as natural deaths, heart attacks, strokes, sudden collapses. But look deeper, all too convenient, all too clean. Allison moved from city to city, state to state. And your husband, Michael..." Jada tapped the ledger, her voice low but steady. "He kept track of every single one." Claire's throat tightened. "You're saying my husband knew?" "I think he was documenting it," Jada replied. "Maybe involved, maybe just aware. But Ethan..." She stopped, her jaw clenching. "Claire, Ethan signed documents connected to some of these deaths. Power of attorney transfers, insurance claims. It's not just your house he sold. It's lives. Years of them." Claire felt the world tilt. Her son. Her only child. A shadow passed across the door window. Allison, watching. Jada slid the folder back into her jacket. "We don't have much time. She's already suspicious of me. Of us." Claire gripped her hand, her voice shaking. "Why are you helping me?" Jada's eyes softened. "Because my grandmother was on that list. And because no one believed me when I said her death didn't make sense. I won't let that happen to you, too." The monitor beside Claire beeped faster, echoing her racing heart. The truth wasn't just close, it was circling, watching, waiting for her to slip. The hallways of St. Jude Medical Center were too quiet that night, too still. Claire lay awake, her eyes fixed on the dim glow of the clock across the room. 2:13 a.m. The beeping of her monitor was the only rhythm breaking the silence. Then, footsteps, soft, controlled. The door creaked open. Allison stepped inside. No clipboard this time, no warm smile, just a small dark vial in her hand. Claire's breath caught. Allison moved quickly, her eyes flicking to the machines. She shut them off, one by one. The room fell into an unnatural silence. She leaned over Claire's bed, her voice low. "You should have burned that book." Claire froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. Allison uncapped the vial, drawing its contents into a syringe. Her hands were steady, practiced. But before she could reach the IV port, the door burst open. "Step away from her." It was Jada. She stood in the doorway, her phone raised, recording. Her voice trembled, but her stance didn't waver. Allison's eyes narrowed, the syringe still in her hand. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said coldly. "This isn't just about her. It's bigger than her. Bigger than you." Claire forced her voice out, weak but sharp. "Then explain it. Tell me why my husband kept a record of all those deaths. Tell me why my son is tied to it." For the first time, Allison faltered. Just a flicker. But it was enough. Her grip tightened on the syringe. Because the people in that book weren't accidents. They were chosen. Chosen. The word hung in the air like poison. Before she could say more, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. A security guard appeared, drawn by Jada's frantic call earlier. Allison slipped the syringe into her pocket, her smile returning as if it had never left. "Just checking on my patient," she said smoothly. "Must have been a misunderstanding." The guard frowned but didn't push. He glanced at Claire, then at Jada, then left with a warning glance. Allison leaned close to Claire as she adjusted the blanket, her words just for her. "This isn't over. And when the truth comes out, you'll wish you had stayed quiet." She left the room as calmly as she entered, her footsteps fading into the darkness. Jada rushed to Claire's side, her hands trembling. "We have proof now. I recorded everything." She admitted it. Claire's heart pounded, though relief never came. Because in that moment she understood something terrifying. If Allison was willing to walk into a hospital room in the middle of the night, bold and unafraid, then whatever she was protecting wasn't just dangerous. It was powerful. And Claire was now the only one standing in its way. By morning, the hospital felt less like a place of healing and more like a trap. Claire couldn't shake the image of Allison's calm smile as she slipped that syringe back into her pocket. If Allison could walk in here undisturbed, what was stopping her from coming back? The discharge papers came faster than expected. Too fast. Ethan signed them with a flourish, insisting it was for her comfort, for her peace of mind. But when Claire looked at his eyes, she didn't see comfort. She saw urgency, desperation. Jada met her in the parking lot, pulling up in a dusty silver Honda. "Don't go with him," she whispered, glancing at Ethan, who was distracted with a phone call. "Come with me." Claire hesitated, torn between the son she had raised and the stranger he seemed to have become. Then she saw it, on the back seat of Ethan's car, a black briefcase, slightly ajar. Inside, a stack of documents stamped with unfamiliar names, insurance forms, power of attorney papers, some dated just weeks before. Her chest tightened. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was proof. She turned back to Jada. "Drive." They pulled out of the hospital lot, Ethan's voice shouting after them. She didn't look back. Hours later, they were at Jada's apartment, blinds drawn, laptop open. The folder of obituaries, the hospital papers, the photographs, all spread across the kitchen table like a crime scene waiting to be solved. And then Claire saw it. In the corner of one document, a scanned insurance claim from a victim in Florida, was Ethan's signature. Clear, undeniable. Her son hadn't just been too trusting. He hadn't just been manipulated. He was part of it. Claire's breath hitched. My God, what did he do? Jada didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled up a digital file, a spreadsheet she'd been compiling from the ledger. Rows of names, dates, places, everyone tied to Allison's trail. And next to certain names, small initials, EM. Claire's vision blurred. Ethan Montgomery. Her son's initials were in her husband's ledger, over and over again. The air in the room grew heavy, almost suffocating. Jada sat back, her eyes full of pity. Claire? I don't think your son's just a bystander. I think he's been profiting from this. For years. Claire gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles whitened. Her body shook with rage, grief, and disbelief all at once. And then, a new fear. If Ethan had been working with Allison, if he had been chosen to inherit whatever this was, then leaving with Jada hadn't just put her at odds with Allison, it had declared war against her own son. And somewhere deep down, she already knew. Ethan wasn't going to let her walk away with the truth. The knock came just after midnight. Not loud, not urgent, just 3 slow raps that carried too much familiarity to ignore. Claire froze in Jada's kitchen. Jada looked through the peephole and whispered, "It's him." Ethan. Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to believe, just for 1 second, that this was the son she raised, the little boy who used to fall asleep in the back seat on road trips to Lake Lanier, the teenager who called her from college in tears, homesick and scared. But the man standing outside that door was not that boy anymore. Jada whispered, "Don't open it." But Claire's trembling hand reached for the lock anyway. When the door swung open, Ethan was standing there in a crisp black jacket, his hair slicked back, his smile too calm for the hour. "Mom," he said softly, "we need to talk." Jada stepped forward, protective. "She's not going anywhere with you." Ethan ignored her. His eyes locked on Claire's, and for a moment, there was warmth. The kind of warmth that made Claire want to collapse into her son's arms and pretend none of this was real. Then his tone shifted. Lower. Colder. "You've been looking at things you shouldn't, Mom." Her stomach dropped. He knew. Somehow, he knew. "I just need to understand, Ethan. Tell me it isn't true," Claire whispered, her voice breaking. But Ethan's silence was louder than any confession. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The room shrank. Jada reached for her phone, but Ethan raised a hand. "Don't. I'm not here to hurt anyone. Not yet." The words cut through the air. Not yet. He leaned closer, lowering his voice until only Claire could hear. "Mom, Allison isn't the problem. She's the solution. Without her, none of this works. Without her, we lose everything Dad built." Her knees went weak. "Dad built?" Ethan's lips curled into a smile. "You really think he was just some perfect family man, don't you? You don't know the half of it." The room spun. Jada grabbed Claire's arm to steady her. "Go home with me," Ethan urged, his voice dripping with persuasion. "Forget Jada. Forget the papers. Forget all of it. I'll take care of you. I always have." But Claire wasn't sure if he meant protection or control. For the first time in her life, she saw it clearly. Her son wasn't asking. He was warning. And when he left that night, closing the door with the same calm smile he had arrived with, Claire knew one thing. This wasn't about Allison anymore. It was about Ethan. And the next move he made could destroy her completely. Sleep didn't come that night. Claire sat at Jada's kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers like they were radioactive. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face at the door. The calm smile. The threat hidden in his voice. She whispered to herself, "What did he mean? Dad built this?" By morning, Jada returned with something Claire hadn't expected. "The ledger," she said, dropping the weathered book onto the table. "My grandmother kept this after your husband passed. She said it didn't belong in anyone's hands but yours." The binding cracked as Claire opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her late husband, Richard Montgomery, the same man she had buried with trembling hands 10 years earlier. But what she found inside wasn't the legacy of a good man. It was a record, page after page of names, dates, payments, obituaries cross-referenced with policy numbers, insurance payouts linked to care services, and at the bottom of every third page, a set of initials, RM, Richard Montgomery. Claire's hands shook so badly the ink blurred before her eyes. Richard hadn't been a victim of circumstance. He had been the architect, the mastermind. Ethan hadn't lied. Richard had built this empire of death. Allison was only carrying it forward. And Ethan? He wasn't being manipulated at all. He was protecting his inheritance. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "All these years, my marriage was built on this?" Jada placed a hand on hers. "My grandmother always suspected. She thought your husband charmed people into trusting him. But this is bigger. These deaths weren't accidents. They were patterns." Claire felt a scream rising in her throat, but no sound came. Just the crushing realization that she had shared a bed with a killer, raised a son who was groomed to take his place, and been targeted as the loose end to erase. She pushed the ledger away, her breathing sharp and shallow. Every memory, the lake trips, the anniversaries, the laughter, soured like poison in her veins. "Jada," she whispered, "if Richard started this, Ethan will never stop. He thinks it's his birthright." For the first time, Claire's fear hardened into something colder. Resolve. If her own family had been built on lies, then she was done being the victim of them. But outside Jada's window, across the street, a black car idled. The engine purred. The figure in the driver's seat leaned forward, watching, waiting. Ethan. He wasn't just protecting his father's legacy. He was hunting the only person left who could destroy it. The knock didn't come this time. The door didn't creak. The moment Claire turned from the kitchen table, Ethan was already inside Jada's apartment. The lock hadn't even slowed him down. He stood in the doorway, calm, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes colder than she had ever seen. "Mom," he said, as if nothing were wrong. "We need to settle this. Tonight." Jada stepped forward, phone in hand. "I'll call the police." Ethan's smirk didn't falter. "And tell them what? That your mother-in-law's husband kept notes? That some grieving widow and a nurse's aide cracked a conspiracy the cops ignored for years?" He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Nobody's going to believe you." Claire's hands trembled at her sides. "Ethan, I raised you. I loved you. How could you—" "Loved me?" His voice snapped like a whip. For the first time, his calm mask cracked. "You never saw me, Mom. You never saw what Dad was building. You thought he was just another man in a suit, kissing your cheek and mowing the lawn. He was powerful. He created something that could last. And he trusted me to carry it on." Claire's breath caught. "You mean killing people, exploiting them? That's what you call a legacy?" Ethan's silence was louder than shouting. His jaw clenched, and in that moment she knew. He didn't even see it as wrong. Jada stepped between them, her voice steady. "You're scared, Ethan. That's why you're here, because we know too much." Ethan's eyes flicked to her, sharp as glass. "You think this is about fear? No. It's about order. Mom had her chance to stay quiet. She could have kept her garden, her yoga classes, her peaceful little retirement. But she wanted to dig. She wanted to see the truth." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. Slowly, deliberately, he laid it on the table. Claire's heart lurched. Her own name, her own signature. Except she hadn't signed it. A transfer of property, the lake house, the last piece she thought she still owned. "I already sold it," Ethan said softly. "You don't have to worry about upkeep anymore." Her blood ran cold. This wasn't about love. This wasn't even about family. It was about erasing her completely. Jada's phone buzzed quietly behind her back, Detective Lee's name lighting up the screen. But Claire couldn't look away from her son. "Ethan," she whispered, tears streaking her face. "You sold the only home I had left, the place your father and I—" "Stop." His voice was flat. "He never loved you, Mom. He respected you enough to keep you in the picture. That's it. But this house, this life, it's mine now, always was. The silence that followed was unbearable. Claire's chest ached, her legs weak, her heart torn between rage and grief. But under it all, one truth rose above the rest. If Ethan saw her as nothing more than a loose end, then she was already living on borrowed time, and the only way out was to fight. The tension in the room was a noose, tightening with every breath. Ethan still stood at the table, one hand resting casually on the forged deed, his other hand hidden in the pocket of his jacket. Claire stared at him, her voice trembling but steady. "You're destroying everything your father built, Ethan, not preserving it." For the first time, Ethan's smile faltered. A flicker of something crossed his face. Anger, maybe shame, but it hardened into rage. "You don't get it," he hissed. "You never got it. Dad trusted me, not you. Me." His voice rose, sharp and jagged. "You think you're the victim here? You were just decoration. You never saw the nights he worked, the deals he closed, the people who respected him. And you want to undo all of it because you can't handle the truth?" Claire's tears blurred her vision, but she stood her ground. "The truth is, your father was a criminal, and now you're following him straight into the grave." Something snapped. Ethan slammed his fist against the table so hard the ledger jumped. Jada flinched. The calm, controlled man who had smiled his way through threats was gone. In his place was something volatile, unpredictable. "You're not going to the police," he snarled. "You're not talking to anyone, because if you do—" His hand slipped out of his jacket pocket, gripping a small silver vial, the same kind Allison had once carried. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Jada's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Put it down, Ethan. That's evidence now. You'll bury yourself." Ethan's eyes flicked to her, burning. "Stay out of this." Claire, trembling but fierce, whispered, "You'd poison your own mother?" His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. The silence was worse than any words. Jada seized the moment. Her phone, still buzzing with Detective Lee's missed calls, was clutched behind her back. She hit record. "Say it again, Ethan," she urged, her tone sharp. "Say your father trusted you to carry on what he started." Ethan froze, realizing too late. His nostrils flared. His control was slipping, his secret bleeding into the open. And then— Footsteps echoed from the hall outside. A sharp knock rattled the door. "Atlanta PD! Open up!" Ethan's head whipped toward the door, panic flashing across his face. For the first time, Claire saw it. The boy she had raised, breaking through the mask. Terrified. Cornered. But instead of surrendering, he made his choice. He grabbed the ledger, the vial, the forged papers, and he bolted for the back door. Claire's cry echoed through the apartment. "Ethan, stop!" But her son didn't look back, and in that moment, as the door slammed behind him, she knew. Ethan wasn't coming back for reconciliation. He was coming back to finish what his father started. And the next time they faced each other, it wouldn't end with words. The moment the back door slammed, 2 officers pushed through the front. Jada lowered her phone, still recording, her chest heaving. Claire just stood there, frozen, staring at the empty doorway where her son had disappeared. Detective Lee was the last to enter, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. He was here, wasn't he? Claire could barely form the words. He took it. The ledger, the papers, all of it. But Jada held up her phone, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and triumph. "Not all of it. I got him talking. I got his confession." The detective took the phone, listening intently to Ethan's words. The rage. The admission that Richard Montgomery had started something Ethan was carrying on. It was enough. More than enough. Within hours, subpoenas went out. Court orders followed. Safety deposit boxes, insurance accounts, hidden trusts, all tied to the Montgomery name, were dragged into the light. And with them came the avalanche. Obituaries that had once been dismissed as coincidence were re-examined. Insurance claims that had slipped through the cracks were reopened. The quiet deaths of seniors across 3 states were suddenly stitched together like a quilt no one wanted to see. Every headline screamed the same thing: the Montgomery legacy, family fortune tied to elder exploitation scandal. Claire read the words with her heart in her throat. Richard's smile stared back at her from an old photograph, plastered across every news station in Atlanta. But beside it, Ethan's face, her son. Jada whispered, "They're tearing it all down." Everything he thought was untouchable. And yet, Claire couldn't shake the dread, because Ethan wasn't the type to crumble under headlines. He was the type to retaliate. She knew it when she saw the message come through her phone. An unknown number, just one line of text. "You should have stayed quiet. Now everyone pays." Claire's blood ran cold. She turned to Detective Lee, clutching the phone in both hands. "He's not going to stop. He's coming for me." The detective nodded grimly. "Then we make sure you're ready." But as the city buzzed with the scandal, as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions outside her door, Claire felt the weight of something darker. This wasn't just about stopping Ethan anymore. It was about dismantling a legacy built on blood. And Ethan wasn't about to let go without a war. The night was too quiet. Claire sat in the safe house Detective Lee had arranged, but safety was just a word. The silence carried weight, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jada paced the room, her nerves on edge. "He's not going to stop. He's going to come here." Claire didn't argue. She knew. A mother always knows when her child is coming home, whether to hug her or to kill her. The hours dragged until a single sound shattered the stillness, the creak of a back door. Every muscle in Claire's body tightened. And then, he was there. Ethan. No calm mask this time. No salesman's smile. Just a son cornered by the truth, by the law, by the ghosts of his father's sins. "Mom," he said, his voice raw, "this is your last chance. Come with me. Leave this behind. We can disappear." Claire's hands shook, but her voice carried strength she didn't know she still had. "Disappear? Ethan, there's nowhere left to run. The world knows now. They know about your father, about you." His eyes flashed with desperation. "They only know what you told them. You could fix this. One word from you and I walk free. Don't you see? You're the only one who can save me." Tears welled in Claire's eyes. "Save you? Ethan. I already lost your father to this. I can't lose myself too." The room thickened with silence. For a heartbeat she saw it. The boy he once was. The son who used to run into her arms after nightmares. But then his hand slid into his pocket. The silver vial glinted under the dim light. Claire's breath caught. "Don't make me do this," Ethan whispered. His voice trembled, not with mercy, but with rage barely restrained. And before he could take another step, Detective Lee burst through the door, weapon drawn. "Drop it, Ethan!" The standoff froze in time. Ethan's eyes darted between his mother and the detective. His chest heaved. For once, he wasn't in control. Then, his shoulders slumped. The vial slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. But as Lee cuffed him, Ethan leaned close to his mother, his words like venom. "This isn't over, Mom. You killed the family. You killed everything Dad built, and I'll never forgive you." Claire's tears finally broke free. Her son was gone. Not by death, but by choice. And yet, when she stepped outside into the early morning air, she felt something she hadn't in years. Freedom. The cameras flashed, reporters shouted. But Claire stood tall, Jada at her side. She wasn't a victim anymore. She wasn't just a widow. She was a survivor. And though the Montgomery name was in ashes, she carried something stronger than any legacy her husband or son had ever left behind. Her truth. What would you have done if you were in Claire's shoes? Would you have protected your son or exposed him to the world? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've followed this story all the way through, don't forget to subscribe. Because every story I tell here is more than entertainment. It's a warning.